We've got some predictions about what's going to happen in 2025. We think that this could prove to be one of the most transformational years on record for the space economy. And this is driven by a few things. I think there's going to be a much greater focus on promoting the space economy and on commercial integration into government programs. I think that SpaceX is the most likely beneficiary here. I think a lot of people are pointing to the fact that, his relationship with the incoming president being the key driver to that. I think that is going to influence things and be a key factor here. But also, SpaceX just has the best solution on the market in a lot of cases, and sometimes the only solution on the market. So it's hard to argue why governments or enterprise or any other customers wouldn't go to SpaceX, right? So that's a big one. I think that's really going to also benefit other companies outside of just SpaceX, right? So it's particularly those that are doing novel, new activities, right? There's going to be, I expect to see some streamlining of regulation and making it easier for companies to try new things and bring new novel capabilities online.
Yeah, I think the technical foundation is already set. Now it's like, how do we remove the barriers to allow these, companies to flourish?
Yeah.
SpaceX will be leading the way, but Starship is going to be, helping develop, new markets and enabling new founders to do great things.
So Starship is going to come online this year. That's another massive one. I mean, we touched on it in this report and in many of our publications. But I think that this is really important because of the potential impact that this vehicle is going to have. It's going to accelerate growth in existing markets. It's going to enable entirely new markets and make a lot of existing infrastructure obsolete. I mean, it's going to completely change our relationship with orbit and how we get there, which is pretty exciting stuff. And the SpaceX has often said that it's the regulation that's been holding them back, particularly on their Starship test program, right? They managed to get to a launch cadence of almost a month at the end of 2024, which is pretty impressive for a program of this size and magnitude. They're planning to double that and launch 25 times in 2025, which is also incredible. And I think a lot of that is going to be enabled by the FAA moving faster and giving them their launch licenses faster and getting more familiarity with the vehicle and what it can do. I think we are going to see some reevaluation and some re-architecting of the Artemis program. I think that there's going to be a more direct line to go to Mars using the Starship vehicle. I think this is a much larger conversation that we probably can't get into all the details today, but it's interesting to think about, particularly to focus on doing something new. SpaceX has been wanting to get to Mars for, that is their primary goal since the founding of the company. They're bringing a vehicle online that's going to enable them to do that, and you've got a president that's coming in that wants to put his name on something, right? So I do think that there's going to be some reevaluation of the Artemis architecture and a leveraging of Starship to go more direct to Mars, which could be good for SpaceX and anyone else who's trying to do that. SpaceX is, despite their direct line to the White House, we do expect to see more competition. We're already starting to see that with New Glenn coming online. We expect other launch vehicles coming online. We do expect to see also some more competition for Starlink and for the satellite communications business. Kuiper is going to be making some moves this year, and we should see Amazon's Kuiper start to come online. Apple's investment in Globalstar, AST Mobile delivering for telecom partners, the Chinese with their 1,000 sails constellation, mimicking Starlink and doing something very similar. So there is more than just SpaceX. SpaceX has had a really great run and has been the dominant player up until this point. We expect them to continue to be going forward. And as kind of a barometer of what is possible here in terms of investment and return on investment, right? Anyway, there's a lot of opportunity here. SpaceX is out in pole position and kind of showing everyone what's possible, but there's a lot of other companies that are coming online and doing really interesting things as well. One other thing that's really important to talk about for 2025 and beyond is spatial intelligence.
With so many new sensors and so much new data coming online, there is a need to be able to better process, better structure, and better manage this information. And so you're actually seeing, a lot of innovation happen in this area. From the new Planet satellites that were launched with NVIDIA Jetson chips to be able to make intelligent decisions at the edge, to new processing techniques down here on Earth that allow us to process very large volumes of data at scale in a cost-effective manner. And one area I'm particularly excited about is the way that these sort of transformers could be applied to spatial data. And there really is an opportunity to start doing that from a location-centric approach, from a spatial-centric approach, leveraging a wide variety of sensors. And so there's a couple, unique sets of companies and technologies that are doing some great work in this area.
So much valuable data that you absolutely have to use AI to derive useful insights from.
Yeah.
So this is a really important, interesting moment in time for spatial intelligence. So bringing it back down to existing markets a little bit as well. So Starship's coming online, one of the biggest markets that this is going to, it's going to accelerate growth in existing markets. It's probably one of the biggest near-term impacts that this vehicle is going to have. It's going to launch many more satellites. If you look at the number of satellites that are on orbit over time, it is now like a straight line up. Key takeaway from our Space Capital Summit was that the rate of growth of satellites on orbit is now greater than Moore's Law. It's happening faster than Moore's Law. It's a straight line up, and somehow when Starship comes online, it's going to accelerate. So it used to be a nice to have. You used to be able to, this was elective to think about yourself in relation to the others around you in orbit. Space traffic management and coordination is going to go from elective to essential. And that's going to happen this year, I think. There's just too much going on. SpaceX alone has 7,000 Starlink satellites in orbit. The Chinese are launching a similar number of satellites, and we've got all this growth that we talked about in these other areas, right? Like this is a key area of opportunity and focus, and a place where we've deployed quite a bit of capital into solutions here. So this is definitely an area to watch. One other one that I think is timely and important is around private capital stepping up. So I think there's going to be a real shift in climate policy with this new administration, and that creates an opportunity for private capital to step up and fill the gap. As it did in the prior administration, and as it's been doing and will continue to do. So one great capability that came online last year was MethaneSat, a very sophisticated, very capable satellite funded by the Environmental Defense Fund to track methane emissions from a global perspective. This is the first satellite of its kind. Before this was independently reported. So this is a super important capability. A lot of the people who built that satellite are now over at Muon, a portfolio company of ours, and Muon is part of the Earth Fire Alliance building FireSat, a next generation, step change capability, being able to detect fires the size of a small classroom within 15 minutes anywhere on the planet. And this is a great initiative. They're building very exquisite, very sophisticated satellite constellation to be able to do this. And so what's happening in LA is devastating, and we need better solutions. We have the capability and the power to build these solutions, and we are proud to back and support companies that are doing this. I mean, because extreme weather events are only going to increase. Interestingly, in 2024, emerging industries had a really big year in terms of investment. We saw a lot of investment dollars go into these emerging areas, not launch, not satellites. This is the space stations, lunar markets, industrials and manufacturing in space, and like logistics and on-orbit servicing and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Which is pretty interesting because you're starting to think about you're starting to see how founders are starting to build for this post-Starship world and are starting to think about these new markets that are opening up. So it makes up a small portion of the space economy. It now makes up 3% of total investment over the last 10 years, which is, so it's a small piece, but it's one of the more rapidly growing pieces of the puzzle. And with lunar markets in particular, there's been $1 billion invested in lunar markets over the last 5 years into a couple of dozen different companies, right? And so like we mentioned, there's 2 landers on their way to the moon. While they're on their way, SpaceX is going to launch another lunar lander in February. So anyway, there's a lot of activity happening in these new areas, which again, seemed like science fiction not too long ago, and probably still seem like science fiction to a lot of folks.
It's a tough area to compete. It's going to be really exciting to watch. And then, one of the critical requirements as these new launch vehicles come online, Starship helps scale up the ability to take, vehicles to space. the ability to monitor what's up there and coordinate activity at scale is going to be fundamental to the long-term preservation of this, growing economy. And so, that all fits within that logistics bucket and is absolutely essential. I think that we're going to see this race for space stations will actually sort of start to materialize. So VAST is expected to launch in 2025. Being the first to actually get hardware in orbit. I think that'll be really incredible to watch and see and sort of see how that all shakes out. And you can see the completeness of that, what they've built so far, and they're going to be testing it, and that's supposed to go up in 20, and it's just super exciting. Like, it's becoming real, right? So